Hello, and welcome to this review of the Westcott Historical Romance Book Series by Mary Balogh. I'm Olivia, your favorite resource for book recommendations you can easily screenshot, and you're watching Random Olive Reads. Now, Someone to Love by Mary Balogh is book one of this series, and this one has a lot of setup. So, no matter what other books of this series you read, you really should read this one first because it explains in detail the chaos and calamity that sets the series into motion. Now, the entire Westcott family is turned upside down when the Earl of Riverdale passes away. The Earl had left no will behind, so his widow figures, okay, he's been sending money to this orphanage, supporting a young woman that I technically don't know anything about, but I will make sure that I'm going to pay her off so she'll never have to bother us again. So she sends the solicitor off to do this. Now, the solicitor discovers critical information that requires the gathering of the huge family tree of people, plus that orphaned school teacher, Anna, who has traveled to London from Bath to hear the news. Now, everyone is at the Duke of Netherby's house. This is Avery, whose stepmother is the sister to the recently deceased Earl. Now, it turns out that the Earl, who was a Viscount at the time, legally married Anna's mother, and before Anna's mother passed away, bigamously married the supposed Countess, making that second marriage invalid and the children from that union illegitimate, which included one son and two daughters. Knowing this, the earldom does not actually go to his son, but passes on to his second cousin, who had never any intention of becoming the earl. Now, this book is critical for introducing all of the people in the Westcott family, how they're related, and what we might expect in terms of future books in the series. At this time, most of the younger generation are not married. They're not quite marriageable age. It's sort of the beginning of their social seasons and their debuts into society. Since Anna's discovery that she is the legitimate daughter of an earl and therefore a proper lady, her relatives have banded together to polish her up for her debut into society. At this point, the former countess and her three children are sort of distant. They've kind of fled the area, and they have not quite accepted Anna as part of their family. Meanwhile, Avery, who is tied to the family but not actually related to the Westcotts, is always present in these interactions and finds himself drawn to Anna despite her apparent plainness. Now, Avery is the type of personality who is strong and quiet and domineering without being loud and brash about it. And he is the highest ranking person in this conglomerate of people. And the romance is soft and slow burn and delightful as you learn more about this world and the complexities of all of the family relationships. Someone to Hold is book two of the series. We follow Camille Westcott, who has been the perfect, proper, snooty Earl's daughter and probably suffered the biggest shock when she found out that her parents were not legally married and that she is now illegitimate. In the previous book, she had suffered a broken betrothal, fled London, and very loudly expressed her distaste for her new half sister Anna. In an effort to learn more about herself and put herself in Anna's shoes, she starts teaching at the orphanage where Anna grew up. Meanwhile, Joel is a portrait painter who grew up with Anna, was her best friend, and had proposed marriage to Anna many years ago. He dislikes Camille on sight because of her pettiness towards Anna and her severe and haughty appearance. However, as the two spend more time together at the orphanage and as he's commissioned by her grandmother to paint her portrait, they start to understand each other and confide in each other. It's a total opposites attract situation, with Camille being the one who needs to adapt to her new station in life and open her heart to the possibility of love and affection. Someone to Wed is book 3 of the series, and we kind of zigzag to the other branch of the Westcott family. We have the ever dutiful and honorable Alexander Westcott, who is not happy with becoming the Earl. Just when he recently made his own estate profitable and is finally considering looking for a wife, he inherits the rundown estate of the earldom but none of the money because the money was not entailed and actually went to Anna instead. He now has to change course and seek a wealthy wife to support his new estate. Wren is out of mourning for her aunt and uncle who raised her and has been a recluse all of her life and now looking for a husband. She thinks that the birthmark on her face will prevent any eligible gentleman from marrying her, so she approaches her offer as a business proposal, offering Alex the money to fix his estate in exchange for marriage. Now, Alex is much too noble to just take the money, and he tries to get to know Wren and determine if they'll suit. Her demeanor is guarded and severe, and Alex doesn't think it'll work. She's also a recluse and has difficulty meeting people in social settings. It seems to be a total mismatch from the get go. However, Alex can't seem to stop thinking about her, and she somehow feels challenged by him, but in a good way, to confront her fears and slowly venture into society. Another delightful slow burn, and it's amazing to see how the Westcotts welcome Wren into their fold and rally around her. We start to see that the very complex Westcott family, despite being part of the aristocracy and being very proper and formal, they are very welcoming. And in fact, this catastrophe of theirs has caused them to be more open minded and accept new people into their family. Someone to Care is book 4 of the series. Now, this one, again, not easy to describe by mere trope, and that's one of the aspects of beauty of Mary Balogh's creativity. Now, Viola and her family had found out after her husband's death that their marriage was not legitimate, causing all sorts of calamity as the Earl's title had passed to Alex instead of Viola's son. Viola, who is a widow but not quite a widow because she was never really the countess, she chooses to distance herself from her family and her in laws since she is no longer and has never been a Westcott. Over the past 3 books, we've seen the Westcott family rally together, provide love and support for all its members, including Viola. But sometimes all of this love and support can be smothering, and Viola decides to retreat on her own back home, taking a hired carriage with no servants or companions. When her carriage needs repair, she stays at a local inn where she re-meets Marcel, a recently inherited Marquess, though he doesn't tell her that. Marcel has been a renowned rake, and Viola had rejected his advances 14 years prior when her supposed husband was still alive. Marcel has not forgotten Viola and purposely strands himself at the inn to spend more time with her. He's got his own tragic backstory with a wife who died many years ago and his nearly 18-year-old children who he's left in the care of their aunt and uncle, plus that whole rake and libertine reputation. These two end up spending their day and night together and escape from their reality for a little bit. Things get more complicated once both of their families get involved, making for all sorts of angst and emotional revelations. Someone to Trust is book 5 of the series. Now, this book starts at the same Christmas family gathering that ends the previous book. At this point, it makes the most sense to have read these books in order, just to keep all the family members straight. Now, Colin is the younger brother of Wren from book 3 and joining in on the Westcott family holiday celebrations. While he's enjoying the celebrations, he's a little bit wistful that his own family does not have this sort of affection for each other, and he's considering searching for a bride next season and taking responsibility for his estate and setting up his own family. While he is considering the young eligible ladies in attendance as potential brides, he's mostly enamored of Elizabeth, who is the older sister of Alex, Wren's husband, and 9 years older than Colin. Elizabeth is widowed to a man who turned violent with drink and has not been interested in remarriage. However, at this point, seeing all the happy couples around her has made her lonely, and she may actually consider marriage this upcoming season. Colin and Elizabeth form a bit of a connection with good conversation, light flirting, and even a kiss. But Elizabeth feels too old for Colin, and Colin feels too immature for Elizabeth. They do eventually agree to a dance together at every ball they attend during the season. When we get to London a few months later, they fulfill the promise of the dance, but are actively courting other people while Colin contends with his shallow mother's machinations. It's interesting to see how these two people end up having honest conversations about their traumatic past and somehow end up together to everyone's surprise. And as always, I love the ever supportive Westcott family, even with this surprising match. We jump a little bit forward in time with Someone to Honor, which is book 6 of the series. It is now about 6 years after the instigating events of book 1, and now we have the Earl's son, Harry, traveling back from home from war after sustaining many injuries. He is being escorted by his friend and commanding officer Gil, who was raised by his unwed washerwoman mother and was cast out of her family. Now, Gil was purchased a commission from his father many years later, so he does know that his father is of some nobility and has money, but he's never interacted with him or had any sort of relationship. For all purposes, Gil has been impoverished and illegitimate. Now, Gil is glad to be back in England, but is facing a custody battle over his young daughter, who was sent to live with her maternal grandparents before Gil's wife died at a house party. He's got a whole lot of struggle ahead of him and is slightly apprehensive of meeting and interacting with Harry's well meaning but smothering family. When Harry's younger sister Abigail arrives to see Harry, she and Gil have terrible first impressions of each other, but slowly start to develop a polite acquaintance over time, eventually leading to their marriage for practical reasons. It's the slowest of slow burns in this book, but totally believable. And then we get to see the Westcotts rally around Gil and his custody battle. Someone to Remember is book 6.5 of the series. If you are usually an audiobook reader, I recommend picking up the ebook or print copy of this book to read the author's note of why she wrote Matilda's story. Not part of the initial plan for the Westcotts, Matilda's personality and love story came about as Balogh was writing about the younger members of the family. Lady Matilda Westcott is the oldest sister of all of the meddlesome aunts, spinster and caretaker of the Dowager Countess. She's, I think, in her 50s at the time of this book, never having been married. We learn in the previous book that she had a prior acquaintance with Charles, Viscount Dirksen, a friend of her younger brother and the natural father of Gil, the main character of book 6. We found it in this book that Matilda and Charles had a brief romance 36 years ago, but Charles's offer for Matilda was rejected by her father. In response to the rejection, Charles basically drowned his sorrows in women, adding to his scandalous reputation. Meanwhile, Matilda never married and stayed with her mother this whole time. In this novella, we see Matilda and Charles interact with each other after all these years, now fully grown and matured. It was also interesting to read about their history and see Matilda's personality shine. She has so much support in this book from all of her nieces and nephews, and it is absolutely delightful. This second chance romance was just so much fun to read, and I loved seeing Matilda finally get her own happily ever after. Someone to Romance is book 7 of the series. Jessica, the sister of Avery, the Duke of Netherby, has finally decided that she will marry this year in her 6th or 7th season. It's about 2 years after the events of Someone to Honor, where Abigail had married Gil. Now, Jessica and Abigail were the best of friends, and Jessica might have kind of like held herself back from enjoying the social season because Abigail couldn't enjoy the social season since she was deemed to be illegitimate way back in book 1. Now, while Jessica typically has a court of interested suitors, she's looking forward to meeting the newcomers of the ton. Now, we get tragic backstory for the male main character in this book, similar to the tragic backstories of Gil and Marcel. Gabriel, in this book, has spent the past 13 years in America fleeing England due to some scandal and is back now to claim his rightful title and to care for those living on his estate. Upon meeting Jessica, he arrogantly decides that he will marry her, since the sister of a duke will fulfill all of the practical criteria he has for a wife. However, Jessica is angry and insulted by his presumption, challenging him to do better if he wants to win her hand. This book was another sort of slow burn, progression. We learn a lot more about Gabriel's backstory, the mysteries involving his scandal and him coming back and his family issues. And it was so nice to see the support that Jessica provides through his entire ordeal. And while the women of Jessica's family do not quite understand the pairing, the men are just as quick as Jessica to guess at Gabriel's true identity. And even though we, the reader, know his true identity at the beginning of the book, it's interesting to see other people uncover it as the story goes on. Someone to Cherish is book 8 of the series. Now, 10 years after Harry had lost the position of Earl due to the discovery of his parents' illegitimate marriage, he's now somewhat of a recluse at his childhood home after suffering his war injuries. Now, the meddlesome Westcott family is concerned for Harry. They want to see him happily settled, tying up the loose ends of that disastrous revelations all of those years ago. Nearby in the village, the vicar's widow, Lydia, who lives alone and is content with her relationship or her independence, but she also desires companionship. When Lydia and Harry are thrown together for a walk one evening, they start a conversation, somehow form a friendship, and there's this hesitant possibility of an affair. Lydia's previous marriage was not as happy as it appeared, and it was nice to see Lydia assert her own identity and preferences in this story. Another slow burn here, even though the affair starts pretty early with a quiet romance, despite the boisterous Westcott family in the background. Now, this one it seems like it would be the end of the series because we start the series with Harry's kind of downfall and we end here with Harry's ultimate romance, but there is one more book. Someone Perfect is a book 9. This is the last and final book of the series and pivots a little bit away from the Westcott family. Um, Even though it takes place very shortly after the events of Book 8. Here we focus on Estelle, an honorary Westcott and stepsister to Harry, Camille, and Abigail. We first meet Estelle in Book 4 when her father, Marcel, marries Viola. In this book, she and her twin brother Bertrand have been living quietly in the country for the past 2 years, and they've just gotten home from the events of book 8. Now, Estelle has an awkward first meeting with Justin, an Earl who has come to retrieve his estranged younger sister and bring her home to his estate. Now, these two, again, have a very slightly antagonistic beginning, but it's clear that Justin wants to put his sister at ease and he invites Estelle and Bertrand to come to the estate for a few weeks to help their friends settle in. Now, while we know a lot about Estelle's backstory from former books and her estranged father for many, many years, this one delves deeper into Justin's history and the cause of his estrangement from his family and his sister. So, again, very similar to the stories of Gabriel or Gil or Marcel. We have this non Westcott character with their own issues and their own traumas and their own history to learn about and unravel. We get to learn the depth of Justin's character along with Estelle and see her slowly falling in love with him. Now, this one is another book in the series that I really enjoyed, even though I could almost predict the reason why Justin was banished by his father. From a series perspective, this book didn't necessarily need to be included since the last book ending on Harry would have already been a really strong ending to the series. It was still nice to see Estelle get her love story, especially since we've gotten to know her through the many other books. And we've actively seen her through the London season and interacting with all of the Westcotts. It's curious that Bertrand didn't also get a story in the series, but I have a feeling that we probably will see him at a later time in another series. I will start by saying that I love this series. All of these books were pretty much these unassuming, quiet, slow burn romances that somehow transport you right into the thoughts of the characters involved. The romances were completely believable and just slowly sneak up on you, just like it does to the characters. I recommend reading the series in order. The complicated Westcott family grows more and more complex as we add spouses and stepchildren and siblings and other children through the 10-book series. In fact, the ebook and print versions have a family tree listed before the first chapter of every book, and the tree grows more complicated each book. We also have more cousins that are side characters, and they probably don't have their own stories because they're not, like, as emotionally damaged as everybody else, but still interesting to see all of the connections. The story itself over the series takes place over the course of a decade with a few little time jumps here and there, like 2 years, 3 years, but it flows really well in sequential order. However, I do not recommend binge reading the series one right after the other in a short period of time. The reason why it's not a binge read is that the stories do move slowly and are kind of similar to each other. So you will need breaks in between. Again, lots of the books are similar in structure with a slightly antagonistic relationship to start and a slow realization of affection. Think book 1, 2, 3, 6, 7, and 9 have that sort of style and are better enjoyed spaced out. On the other hand, once you finish book 6, that's Abigail and Gil's story, you might want to immediately pick up 6.5, which is Matilda and Charles's story, to catch up on the romance that was slightly hinted at the end of book 6. Now, I have heard complaints that this series can consist of repetitive information, as the description of the great catastrophe or the great disaster or those instigating events from book one, it's described in every book so that if you're picking up the series from the middle, you kind of know what's going on. Also, the description of the sprawling Westcott family, all of its members, the personality of each of its members, it's also given in each book. I actually kind of like these sections because they're described in the main character's point of view and through their own experiences with these other family members and their experience through that catastrophe or disaster. Now, each book may also be considered to be long and drawn out because we get to read both main characters' perspective on the same events sometimes, which can be different from other romance books where we only see one point of view at any given moment and then continue to move forward in the timeline or story when we switch the point of view. I actually like the extra depth of understanding of the characters and knowing what they were thinking during those pivotal moments. Overall, like I said, I really enjoyed this series, but I can understand how it's not for everyone due to its slow moving nature. Again, spacing these books out, interspersing them between other faster paced books that you might read will still be really enjoyable. Thank you so much for watching this video. Links to all of these books are in the description box. Hopefully, you'll find one of them that you enjoy. Like and subscribe so you don't miss future videos, and you can follow me on Instagram at randomolive.